Anyway, before I begin, I would like to ask those that would willing to join me in a prayer. I would like to say a prayer before my presentation. Dear Heavenly Father, we're gathered here today to hear testimony of your blessing on my life and on my family. So I pray that you fill this room, fill me with the Holy Spirit, that whatever comes out from my mouth will be pleasing to your ear. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. It's okay, maybe, yeah, okay. Let me try, okay. So, seeing all of you here threw me off a little bit because this is supposedly a talk to students, and suppose there's only 20 of them. And I can see in the audience that I think a lot of them should be up here talking instead of me. So I try to back out, but I think it's a little bit late, huh? So some ground rules before I begin, okay? I encourage you all to take notes. I'm serious. Write down your questions because there will be ample time for Q&A. And I encourage you to ask questions, all of you to ask questions. That's the best way to learn, not just listen. If I talk too fast and you miss some points, you can raise your hand and ask me to repeat. I don't mind interruptions like that because it is very important for you to all to follow my train of thought. Any question before I start? Good? Okay. I'm going to start by telling you my travel schedule for 2012 to give you a taste of what my life is. January, I went to Aspen first. January 1st to 6th to ski. February to Aspen again to ski. End of February, I went to Hong Kong to visit our factory in Kaohsiung. And immediately after that, I went to Nagoya, Japan, to look into a ramen franchise. What does that have to do with $1 Million Baby furniture? Nothing. Then I went back to Hong Kong. I went to Guangzhou. The reason I went to Guangzhou is I have an office there, and I haven't been there for a long time, and they just doubled their size and moved into a new office. So I wanted to go there and I spent one night there. Immediately the next day, I flew down to Melbourne and Sydney for overnight trip to meet a potential distributor for our products down there, and at the same time meeting a brand down there that we can distribute in the US. After that, I went back to Hong Kong and for a few days, and then I went to Tokyo, Japan with my wife's brother, my brother-in-law, and we spent about 10 days enjoying the cherry blossom seasons. After that, we went back to Hong Kong. I went to the factory again in Kaohsiung just for another visit. After that, a rest in Hong Kong, back to Milan for one of the biggest trade show in furniture in Milan. And there, something really great happened. My son proposed to his fiancée in Milan because he worked for me, and we were happy, and she said yes. And I forgot that before the trip to Milan, my daughter was proposed by her the now husband. So within 3 weeks, we had 2 proposals and 2 engagements. After the Milan trip, we went back to Hong Kong, and then I went to Palau for my diving trip. After Palau, we have the layover in Taipei, and then back to Kaohsiung a little bit to visit the factory, and then back to Hong Kong. So this is only up to May right now. In June, the beginning of June, we were in New York to attend a wedding, and then to Boston for graduation, up to Durham, New Hampshire to visit my wife's brother, and then back to Hong Kong. In July, early July, went to Wuzhou, which is really, really inconvenient. It's a 5-hour car ride from Guangzhou to get there. There's no train, whatever. Why? To just see a new factory. We did that, came back, end of July, went to San Francisco to meet with East Behar, which is one of the well-known designer in the world. We were talking about maybe some projects, so that's San Francisco. In August, back to Taipei to visit a friend who is in need of some friendship, let's just put it this way. So we would do that just because to be there with him. And then back to Hangzhou. Why we were in Hangzhou? because remember my son proposed and was engaged in Milan in April, and when he was young, we traveled to a resort outside of Hangzhou called Fuchun Sanzhuang, and then he said, when I get married, I want to marry here. So we wanted to back and check just to make sure that that is a resort that is possible. So we did that, and then they left, and then we went on to Chengdu as the beginning of our trip to Tibet, our second time to Tibet, and then Kathmandu. So that was a 10-day trip. Came back to Hong Kong, and then went back to Los Angeles. In October, there's a big trade show in Louisville, Kentucky for our company, so we were there. After that, instead of returning home, we went to Baltimore to visit a friend who's head of pulmonary of Johns Hopkins Hospital, a classmate of mine. Then we went on to New York City to attend another wedding, back to Hong Kong, back to Palau for our second dive trip this year, back to Hong Kong, middle of December, family gathering with all my sisters in Hong Kong for the Christmas Day, and then the whole family went on to Singapore because one of my younger sister was born on January 1st, and this past January 1st she celebrated her 50th birthday and also her 25th anniversary. So that's 1 year of traveling. And I just came back from Hong Kong last week, and inevitably people always ask whether my trips, all the trips, are for work or for pleasure. What do you think? Because of my lifestyle, many more will ask whether I'm retired or not. Now, for most all of you, you will wonder why I would open this talk with two such common questions. Maybe you see that if I tell you my answer is always the same, to the first question, I will always reply, please define work and pleasure, and why should there be a difference between the two? You see, your answer is both, right? My answer, or my question is that should there be a difference? And to the other question, I say define retirement and clarify retire from where to where. It is now appropriate for a clear and strong disclaimer before I continue. My objective this evening is not to give you a set of right answers to a bunch of questions. I'm not giving you another list of how-tos to teach you or how to live a great life. My objective is to share with you a very simple version of some of my findings in my life. My objective is to encourage you all to recognize the importance of being open-minded, the importance of willing to see the whole world through different sets of lenses. By the way, that represents me. So I'm using that as unless we are absolutely sure that we are using a set of identical assumptions, my experience in arguing who's right or wrong are futile exercises. Okay, let me illustrate. Some of you have seen this before. What is this? So can someone I want to interact a little bit. What is this? Old lady and a young lady, right? We've played this game before, right? So this is about perspective. What about this? A glass or two faces, right? Okay, who can tell me why I put this up? Who can tell me this? Come on. What calculation?
You're definitely not a CPA.
Anyone? Come on. Right? So this is two different bases, and they're both correct, right? In their basis. But if you switch the basis of this equation, then they're both wrong, right? So in my entire life, I've met people with similar values and assumptions, but never identical. Therefore, a right or wrong argument is not very productive. However, I believe the sharing of different points of view with the intent of changing values and assumptions is more interesting and constructive. And that is what I hope to accomplish tonight. I want to stimulate a habit of deep thinking and clear thinking in all of you. Life will be more interesting that way. So remember this statement. There's no absolute right or wrong, only different points of view and choices. So back to my original two questions. I encourage you all to not separate your activities into work or pleasure, but to always work with pleasure. That will render the term concept of retirement meaningless. We only have one life to live, so let's truly enjoy every moment of it. Some of you may say inside your head right now, hey, I heard that cliche before. You know? It's easy for you to say. You just don't understand how tough life can be. Life is tough is one of the possible views. Life is beautiful is another. And there are many other possible views. You can choose to limit your view to just one, a tough life. Or you can choose to not view life with only a few options, but with infinite options. Let me give you two real examples of how too diverse a lifestyle can achieve work and pleasure at the same time. One of my father's friend who passed away recently in Hong Kong was probably the wealthiest man in Hong Kong and one of the wealthiest in the world. No one knew for sure because all his companies were private. He worked 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to midnight, ate all his meals in the office. No, he's a frugal man, so he doesn't have a corporate kitchen or dining room. His wife would bring him boxed meals, Fan Hao, to eat at his desk. This may be one of the worst lifestyles, right, that you have heard of. So why am I telling you this? That is because my father's friend told my father that it was his conscious decision to live that way because he enjoyed and loved that lifestyle. He is not interested in anything else. He loved making money. That was his hobby and his passion. He had absolutely no interest in anything. I applaud that because this person made a conscious decision after deep thinking. It is not about right or wrong, but a deliberate choice of lifestyle. And now back to me. Since 2001, when my youngest child left home for boarding school and made my wife and I early empty nesters, I've spent about 50% of my time, 180 days outside of LA each year. Every morning, I wake up whenever I can, no alarm clock, whenever I have rested fully. I don't go to the office every day, except when I'm invited by my employees. And I spent 1 week every quarter meeting with all my teams to review their performances. That's my work week every quarter. I have the luxury to decide what I want to do every day, and then I go do it. And that includes my travel to my favorite cities like Tokyo, Paris, Venice, Italy, and Hong Kong, of course. I travel frequently enough that I literally only eat French food in Paris, Japanese food in Tokyo, and Italian food in Italy, and excellent Chinese food in Hong Kong. Besides eating, I love to cook and collect fine wines. My hobbies include scuba diving, which I do twice a year, skiing 3 times a year, hiking, biking, etc. I played in a rock band a few years ago because I love playing the piano, the guitar, and the drums. To most people, this is a dream life, and I agree. A lifestyle that gives me immense pleasure and satisfaction. But this lifestyle is so different from my father's friend's lifestyle, so which one is right? Remember what I said in the beginning, there's no absolute right or wrong, only different points of view and choices. And unless we are willing to consider changes in our own viewpoints and choices, we will never make changes and improve. We will just be stuck in insisting that we are right. You may wonder if I was born that way, or how I come to decide on this lifestyle. Here's my story. Before 2001, I was no different, from any other hard-charging, successful businessman. You will find more than enough books to read from self-help section or business section or from Amazon.com. And I have read many of them. You can now also watch videos on YouTube of these successful business executives making speeches. I hate to disappoint you, but you're not going to hear anything like that tonight from me. I grew up in a Christian family, always among the top 3 during my kindergarten and elementary school years. Skipped the grade and entered DBS, or Diocesan Boys School, one of the premier boys' school in Hong Kong, after a successful entrance examination. From DBS, I studied my last 2 years of high school at Worcester Academy in Worcester, Massachusetts, and graduated valedictorian. I applied only to MIT and Harvard and got into both of them. I entered Harvard as a sophomore because of my outstanding AP test scores. I graduated cum laude economics after 3 years from Harvard. Then I joined my father's textiles manufacturing business in Hong Kong in 1979, got engaged to my Harvard classmate. We were married at Memorial Church in Harvard Yard during her graduation week 1 year later in 1980. Our daughter was born in 1981, son was born in 1982. In 1983, then Prime Minister of Great Britain, Margaret Thatcher, announced that Hong Kong would be returned back to China in 1997. So I left the family business. I joined Li & Fong Trading, which actually is the largest, not just in Asia, but in the whole world, trading company in the world. And I started the San Francisco office, getting my US passport or citizenship in 3 years. In 1987, at the age of 29, I became the youngest director of Li & Fong in their history. I resigned immediately with a 3-month notice after the Tiananmen incident in June of 1989. So in October of 1989, I landed in LA with my whole family. I bought $1 Million Baby in early 1990 and officially began my life as an entrepreneur on April 1st, 1990. Yesterday was my company's 23rd anniversary. It was not a great time to start a new business during the early 90s. There was a recession caused by the savings and loan crisis, and together with the collapse of the Japanese asset bubble. In spite of all that, $1 Million Baby made the Inc. 500 fastest company in 93, 94, and 95. And we also made the list this past 3 years during this recession. Again, I will not go through a standard talk of showcasing how I grew $1 Million Baby from $600,000 in annual sales with one style of crib to now one of the premier companies with 6 top-rated brands of leading styles in the baby furniture industry. For sure, I have great stories to tell and it may take days. But to be honest, while entertaining, these type of presentations are really not very practical. I'll explain why later. And it should be no surprise to all of you that I did, in fact, have to execute in perfect textbook manner everything written in these business books, business school type books. Different speakers will have different ways of presenting these fundamentals as if they're different, but they're really not. So I did do a lot of things right. Strategic planning, niche marketing, you name it, I did it. So let's move on. In 1997, my mother passed away, followed soon by my father in the year 2000. I was 42 years old. It was traumatic, but I was blessed to have my pastor to spend one-on-one time with me once a week whenever I was in LA over the course of 3 years. That started my practice of deep thinking, or clear thinking. That's a title of a bestseller in Germany that's being translated into English at this moment. More about that book later. The death of both my parents made me confront the question of the meaning of life. I realized that my lifelong mission is to get to know Jesus Christ. That means moving towards light and away from darkness. That means moving towards truth and away from self-deception. Again, this is my point of view. Among many Christians, I observe that there are still differences in opinion because we all look through our own set of tinted glasses. I do believe there is an absolute truth in Christ, but we as the created versus the Creator will not be able to fully attain that truth until the second coming of Jesus Christ, when we meet in the New Jerusalem. My faith is what has allowed me to live beyond the normal calipers of human experience. I do not want to be judged by how much money I've made, how much control I may have over worldly things, nor do I want to be successful by how most people would define it. I do not focus on how to make the most money or how to grow my company bigger and bigger or how to be famous. From my point of view, making money, growing the company are all results of my being, not my goals or lifelong mission. My focus is on loving God and loving my neighbor. These are the tenets upon which I made all my decisions personally and also in business. If my sole motivation in doing everything and anything is to love God and love my neighbor, I believe the results will be good. If my company's sole motivation is doing everything to love God and love my neighbor, I believe my company will be good, profitable, and continue to grow. That is why $1 Million Baby is the safest company in the world, with zero recall in our history based on faulty designs. However, if I set my goal to say profitable, I'm not sure that being good is a guaranteed result. It may not be, no, it may be, but not necessarily. In fact, many bad things can happen if we set making money as the goal. Will anyone here buy any milk formula for their babies from a Chinese company? Anyone? I also live every day as if it were my last. And when the time comes for me to leave this life of which I have really no control, I will have no regrets. You see, things are much clearer when I am glorifying God rather than glorifying myself. Now let's talk about the book that I mentioned before, that I bought actually during my recent trip to Hong Kong. It's a Chinese book. No, it's in Chinese when I bought it. The book is written in Germany and it's being translated, as I said, into English right now. And you can pre-order it from Amazon.com. The title is The Art of Thinking Clearly by Rolf Dobelli. Rolf, R-O-L-F. The last name is Dobelli, D-O-B-E-L-L-I. The book name is called The Art of Thinking Clearly. I personally like to use the term deep thinking in sort of my own learning, but deep thinking clearly I think is equally powerful. The book listed 52 examples of shallow thinking or not thinking clearly about commonly accepted principles. I want to share with you just 3, which I think is appropriate for tonight. The Olympic swimmer illusion. What is this about? It's about the theory you pursue your dreams. You heard that before, right? A lot of graduation speeches. If you have a dream, pursue it. If you work hard enough, you can be anything. You can be anybody. My conclusion, forget about those things. They're not true. And this is that means if you swim hard enough, can you be in an Olympic team? Can you be like Phelps? A lot of people, I mean, a lot of these classes or these motivational book things, you can do that. They try to teach you that. So that's one of the original myths. One of the first myth that he said that, okay? It's not true. It's really not true. The second one is called the herd mentality. Now, just because everybody's doing it, does that mean that it's right? A lot of people follow that. So my hypothesis is that a lot of people said, seems like if you want to be successful, if you want to control your life, make a lot of money, start a business, be an entrepreneur. True? Not true. Not true. And then the third one is really interesting. It's called the overconfidence effect. And it's actually an economic term and has been studied by Professor Howard Raifa, R-A-I-F-F-A. That means they actually studied and documented and proved that human beings tend to be overconfident about their guesstimate, about their expectation, about their own ability, about a lot of things. And it's scientifically, mathematically proven that there is this effect called overconfidence. So why I'm sharing this is that basically I think running a business or starting a business is very difficult, and it's getting more and more difficult. And I will share with you some statistics just to illustrate my point. In 2010, there are 5.6 million businesses in the United States. 5.6 million businesses. The total population of the United States is 304 million people. So if you divide 5.6 million, assuming they're all owned by someone, right? I mean, of course you have shareholders. I just assume that 5.6, it's all business owners like myself. So divide by 340 million, that's 1.8 million, or 1.8%. About half of all these establishments survived 5 years or more. Okay, actually, the first year is even less. I mean, I think only 10% survive. But as you go a little bit longer, it gets a little bit better. Then I compared this. I was trying to looking at this, right, using that as an example. Just about every swim club in America, these organizations where your children go and join, right? So that's a good number in terms of trying to estimate how many swimmers is in the United States. So that number comes up to be about 300,000 in terms of the whole United States, in terms of the swim club and all the little children in all the grades. And they try, I mean, all these try to, that's where all the Olympic swimming comes from, but that's where. So, and then I look at the US Olympic team. There are 49 of them, okay? So if you divide 49 with 300,000, that's 0.16%. Okay, 0.16%. So I use the same number, right? Assuming, okay, if you swim hard enough, you dream hard enough, you can be one of them, okay? So you have a chance of a 0.016%. So if you translate that into the business, which is 5.6 million businesses, there are 915 star entrepreneurs, right? Does that make sense? 1.16% times 5.6. So how many of you here can name 915 entrepreneurs? Famous entrepreneurs? Anyone? I think at most, right? You can name 10, maybe 20, 30, 50. What it is a myth, right? So all those people, Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and I don't know, I mean, who else? Steve Jobs, come on.
Daniel Fong.
You know what I mean? So I'm just saying that when you can only name 10 or 20 or even 100, that means that number is smaller than being an Olympic team. I mean, you're talking about really the superstar of running a business. So for me to come here and say, you know what, all these students that are here, you can do it, you know? Really, work hard, get your MBA degree, you know, you can do it. You can be famous, you can make a lot of money, you can be in, you know, go public and all that. I mean, that to me, I think is really irresponsible if I tell you this. It's irresponsible. Anyway, so let's start with the